Hello and welcome everybody. We are about to get started here. Welcome. And feel free to keep your videos on. And also we're going to keep everyone on mute, just a little logistics there. I'm Rebecca and I'm the communications wizard here at Round Sky. And today we're going to talk about collaborative strategic planning, what it means, how you can bring some of these skills to your team and keep you aligned to your goals and visions. So while you're on this call, I want to invite you to think about strategy for yourself and your team, and you'll get to share it as we'll be diving into some of the interaction, some of this through interaction today. So first off, I want to tell you a little bit about Round Sky, and I want to tell you three things. So for those who have been on this type of call with us before, we are mixing things up a little bit, and so I'm going to tell you three things. So three things you can remember about us, just so we all know who's on the call. So the first thing is that Round Sky is a worker-owned cooperative. Many people don't know that about us. We work with all types of leaders, aspiring leaders, and organizations that value and want to improve their democratic and participatory processes. And so that often gets lost in the mix because we're kind of a meta co-op in some senses. And secondly, as you all are experiencing right now, we often create free offerings like this webinar to support people in their professional and personal development. And we also have our free self-care challenge available just through January 10th. So if you're not participating in that training, it's a really great way to hone in on what you want planned for 2019 and reflecting back on 2018. And some of our participants are doing it with their whole team, which is pretty exciting. And then this is our last webinar of 2018, but we will definitely continue this in 2019 as well. And you can find that information on our website. And lastly, the third thing is that part of our strategic focus for 2018 and for 2019 moving forward is honing in our collaborative leadership certification program, level 1 and 2, which some of you may know about. And we really focused on that because it was the way that we saw the most change happening in the past, and we wanted to focus on individuals rather than full teams. We felt that was more movement for our people. So we made it accessible online. We offered a lot of scholarships for our community, and it worked out pretty well. And I'll send information about that soon with some fun numbers. And we received really amazing reviews from our clients and students that honestly make me blush a little bit. Someone recently told me that I fulfilled the promise of telling her it was life-changing, and that's pretty sweet. So those are three things I want you to know about us before we get started. Before we do introductions, if you haven't already, please grab a pen and a paper or have a screen open, because this is going to be interactive, and it will serve you well to have that with you. So I'll just give you a few seconds. And while you're doing that, I want to move on to some logistics about the space that we're in. So if you haven't been in Zoom, you can ask any questions, or you can answer questions in the chat box, which should be on the bottom of your screen. And I'll just put a little hello in there. It looks like a little hello, so you see it. Something is blinking for me, so. Oh no. Okay. Cecile, if you could put a hello in there, that would be great. It's not.
All right.
Me. So, there it is. Oh, it's in the middle of my screen. Okay, so there it is. Now we all see it. And we'll take clarifying questions throughout. You can send me specific ones there's a to button, goes to everyone, or you can message a person specifically. So if you have a technical question, reach out to me, Rebecca at Round Sky. And we'll also, this webinar is recorded. It's recorded right now so that we can share it along to those who can't make the meeting, and for people to review it as they'd like. So feel free to be as candid as you like in the breakout groups, because those won't be recorded. We'll have some breakout rooms. So just this whole meeting space, this virtual big space. And in general, like I said earlier, for those who just jumped on, we'll be keeping everyone on mute unless they're speaking, because our speakers and mics have a really great way of picking up that background sound, and it's much easier to hear one person at a time. So now I want to give us space to get to know who's on the call. So please use that chat box and tell us 3 things about you. And I have them up here on the screen. And feel free to say hello to other people on the call. So let us know your name, your location, and something that brought you to this webinar today. And while people do that, I'm going to keep on moving, but feel free to say hello to each other if you're in the same area, or if whatever you'd like, your location, your name, and what brought you to the webinar. And so now I'll introduce myself as you all do that. Don't be shy. I'm Rebecca, as I said, the communications wizard here at Round Sky, and I currently live and have been in New Orleans for about 5 years, but I'm originally from California. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today because I found that the collaborative strategic planning practices that we're going to introduce to you have been really helpful for me personally. In the past, my understanding of strategic planning was pretty boring, and it was a long process. It didn't feel relevant to my day-to-day work. And it would sit in a binder that I would not look at very often. I think most of us have heard that. And it seemed like a distant dream in some ways. So my favorite thing about this practice is that it is super engaging in a team environment, and it feels directly connected to what my work is contributing to. And there's something energizing to plan out what my priorities are with my team. So really thinking about what am I going to put my time in for the next year, for the next 3 years, for the next 3 months, whatever that process is. So that's me, and today's webinar will be co-led by Cecile Green, and I'll let her introduce herself to you all.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Cecile Green, one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions and the primary instructor for CoLab at the moment. I live near Montpelier, Vermont, and I've been a social entrepreneur for over 30 years. And as part of that evolution of my professional life, I published Collaboration That Works, a ruthlessly practical handbook for a generative world, as a training manual that summarizes the research I've done into common power dynamics at work and offers a synthesis of over a dozen different collaborative methodologies into a set of practices for healthy shared power. And the most exciting thing for me about this webinar is offering a new perspective on strategic planning that grounds it in everyday organizational life and provides relief for the pervasive sense of overwhelm that many of us chronically deal with. So thanks for coming today. And just to give you a preview of what we're going to be doing on the webinar today, we're offering a lightning fast overview of a collaborative strategic planning process. And we'll start by looking at what is strategic planning, the value it provides to organizations and teams, followed by a high-level step-by-step perspective on strategic planning process. From there, we're going to walk you through each of those little steps with a little time for some activities so that you get to apply what you're learning right here on the call together. Because this is a lightning fast introduction to the process that you can that can really honestly take organizations months to complete, we're expecting that you yourself will just get a little bit of a start for yourself, which you can choose to complete later. So for now, I'll pass it back to Rebecca.
Great, thanks. So to get started here, or to continue getting started, I want to invite you to think about what strategic planning means to you in 1 to 5 words, and this might be part of how you introduce yourself. And I'm going to put a whiteboard up here, which, can you all see that? The whiteboard?
Not now we do. Thanks,
Okay,
Rebecca. There it is.
So I want you to, this is kind of a fun, interactive activity. You can see that you can annotate on this, and you get there by, on your toolbar, it should say annotation tools, and you can click that, and then you can click text. And so if I click text on that little toolbar that comes up, I can write in my answer to what strategic planning means to me. So this is an open space, we can all do that. So thank you for whoever got that started. A means to reduce overwhelm and still stay on track, absolutely. And I'll put one in here as well, and then we can read them off. All right, and then if you click outside of the box, then it goes if anybody's having trouble. Great, dreaming big, hope, visioning, and dreaming what's next, creating an organized direction based on values in the known environment, focused, clear, and aligned priorities. These don't all have to be sunshine. If you have things that, I'll put one down, like I said earlier, boring. Sometimes like disconnected. That's a bummer about strategic planning. Making measurable, attainable goals. Absolutely. And if you're not quite getting the annotation down right, feel free to put it in the chat box and I'll put it on here. Staying focused, getting everyone on the same page. Great. Well, this is a great start to how we're all seeing about what strategic planning is, getting on the same page together. Someone put in the chat box undervalued. I'll put that here. That's absolutely, that can definitely come out. Being honest about what has worked and not. That's a great scenario. If people can be honest about what worked, sometimes that doesn't happen. Going farther together. Hindsight. Absolutely. Great points. So I will close that out and we'll continue. So now that we have this understanding together, then let's now move into defining what strategic planning is and why it's important. So I'll pass this back to Cecile.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's nice to get a snapshot of our experience, collective experience around strategic planning. And in short, we've come to define strategic planning as a process that all organizations go through, whether or not they're aware of it. So it could be happening implicitly, but it's really a key conversation around how any organization will prioritize the resources, be those time, money, or other assets over a given period of time to bring about their intended purpose in a financially sustainable manner. And essentially, it's an unavoidable conversation, if you wish. And if it's happening implicitly, this is where we can get a lot of divergence across, oh, hey, I think we should be doing this. Someone else thinks we should be doing that, right? So in short, it's a conversation about our intended priorities. And ideally, it happens collaboratively. Often, organizations think of strategic planning as a big, long, boring, and expensive process in terms of both time and money that an organization really only needs to do every 5 to 10 years or so, usually by the board, perhaps the leadership team, and they do it on behalf of the whole organization. And while this is the model that has emerged in the last several decades from corporate America as the standard for conducting strategic planning, newer, more agile, collaborative understandings of strategic planning paint a very different picture of a strategic planning attitude, or a culture, right, that embeds our ability to plan and adapt on the fly without losing momentum or focus. And this as overall a much more effective way of conducting strategic planning. And today, we're going to give you a really quick introduction to this kind of strategic collaborative planning, a kind that doesn't have to cost much, can happen on a dime or take a year depending upon your current situation. And it's a conversation which encompasses all of the perspectives in your organization, as opposed to just coming from the top down. So strategic planning is really important because without aligned perspectives on what we're spending our time and resources on, we can be guaranteed that teams and individuals will lose focus, spend resources on unimportant projects, become overwhelmed with too many directions and too many projects all at once, which of course leads to burnout and lackluster outcomes. And I'll just say from my work with teams, this is very common. So if you find yourself in this place, just know you have you have lots of good company out there. So this isn't a set of skills that we've really learned how to integrate for the most part in our collaborative teams yet. But that's hopefully what we're here to speak to. So let's talk for just a minute about the benefits, right? So in addition to going through the process of narrowing down our initiatives, organizations find that it's much more effective to include the perspectives of all the teams impacted by those choices, right? Especially if you have to go through the painful, sometimes very painful process of saying, no, we're going to help this group of people and not that. That's really, that sits badly in our stomachs, so to speak. Often for mission-driven teams, we want to help everyone, right? And so that can be a really painful process, and including everyone who has a perspective on the matter, turns out you get much better results in the end, and you get much better buy-in. So they, once a sort of strategic plan is articulated for the whole organization, the idea is that every team within the organization is also going to articulate their initiatives based on that whole strategic plan. And this achieves several goods. Essentially, we get the best ideas out there, we get more accuracy in terms of identifying potential issues, what can go wrong, what are we not thinking of. And another one is that we get to really get everyone's participation in this, and especially if all of these teams are the ones that are going to go out and put this into action, much better to have their input in the first place, because otherwise you end up losing focus, and the telephone line of communication on down from the top can often end up with garbled output. And we also get a really clear plan that's detailed down to daily operational level. And that's really what's needed in order to have a plan that's effective, aligns with what we need, can adapt when needed, and really clearly includes everyone. So let's take a look at what the various steps are for strategic planning. And we're going to walk you through these activities and ease you into these practices that we've researched and synthesized into the collaborative communication operating system we call CoLab that we teach. And here's the overview, really, bullet by bullet, of what we recommend for strategic planning. We recommend that every team in the organization go through this same process as needed, meaning as soon as we've completed an initiative or something else has happened to change our course of action, we revisit these, we update them, we change them as needed. We're not going to wait 5 years. We're not even going to wait a year. We may not even wait a month. We do that as soon as we sense there's a need for a new clarity here. So we're going to go into each of these steps a little bit more, give you a sense of how to facilitate this with the team, and then give you a chance to experience it individually right here on the call. So in order to set you up for these activities together, let's take a moment right now for you to think about what organization do you want to do this for? If it could be a brand new team, could be a team you've been a part of for a while, could have been a team that you maybe left because things weren't working so well. If you can't think of a team, you're welcome to use yourself and walk through this process for yourself as an individual. And so I'll just give you 10 seconds to identify who you want to use, a team or yourself. All right. So with that selection made in your mind, let's jump right into the first step, review current state. And really, review current state is an opportunity to conduct what is commonly called a SWOT analysis. So that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. However, the review current state and this particular map that we've come up with really asks you to look at those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from a variety of multiple perspectives. Often what happens is organizations can kind of get locked down in terms of what they consider relevant for themselves and lose perspective, essentially. So this map will walk you through, and it includes really a perspective from our customer or client or stakeholder, whoever it is that's part of who we're serving. We really want to take a look at ourselves from their perspective as well. When you facilitate this with a team, we recommend that you use the current state map, which you see up on the board, or some equivalent, and print it out on large format paper, put it up on the wall if you're in person, or do it as a virtual whiteboard, like we just did with Rebecca. And take some time to answer these current state map questions as a group using silence to reflect and record. And then take a little time after people have entered sticky notes to theme as a group. Really, you want to look for answers that feel real, like the themes that are real for your current moment. And it's really important when conducting this activity with a team to clarify that you do not have to have not everyone has to agree on what you see for your current state. In fact, diverging perspectives at this point in time can be very helpful to creating a more accurate picture of your current situation. By the time you are done with the strategic planning, you will have a set of initiatives to which you all consent, but now's not the time to look. Now's not the time to sort of get that alignment. Now's the time to actually cast and look for the outliers, the outlying perspectives in the room. So with that brief introduction, let's do an activity together and give you a chance to answer some of these questions with the organization you selected or yourself. And up on the screen, you should see some questions to consider. You don't have to answer all of them, and you don't have to don't have time to be fully comprehensive, but you can get your juices rolling and continue after the webinar if you'd like. You can also use the work that you do here today to jumpstart the conversation with your team. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to reflect and write on these prompts. And if you find yourself out of easy answers, you can begin to look for themes across your answers yourself. All right, here we go.
And there's a few people on the phone, so I'll read out a few of the questions. So feel free to turn the volume down if you'd like, if you're focusing, for those who aren't on the phone. But on one corner of the map, there's what work is really important to us, what difference could our passion make in the world, what tensions exist in our culture that point in new directions for us. And this is not all the questions, but I'll just read a few. On another part is, what are the gaps for our constituents in getting their needs met? Who really influences them and how? On another part is, how are our current purpose, business model, and strategy serving us? How are we doing financially? On another part is, where have we been most successful? Where could we get better at what we do?
Okay, just about another 30 seconds. Okay, so there may be more that you're itching to get out there, and definitely feel free to take time after the webinar to keep the juices rolling. But for now, let's move into the next step of strategic planning, so you get a taste for that too. And that's called brainstorming potential initiatives. After you're done with the current state and creating the themes that are relevant for your team at the moment, You want to take a few minutes to do a similar process, except what we're looking for here are, given our current state, what should our initiatives be for the next period of time? Now, that could be the almighty 5 to 10 years, or for others, 3 months is plenty. But really, brainstorming is an opportunity to leverage the innovation of the whole team on behalf of identifying what's most important for the organization to focus its resources on, and then that next interval, whatever you choose. So at the beginning of your brainstorm, really identify that timeline that's appropriate for your current circumstances. And then when you're facilitating a brainstorm, there's a few basic rules here to keep in mind. First of all, there are no dumb ideas. And that's not to say that some ideas are, more valuable than others, that they are. But the basic idea is that any idea can spark other ideas. So encouraging that flow and popping, essentially, of ideas is what you're looking for as facilitator. And the other thing to do is to keep that surfacing happening. So don't disintegrate into crosstalk or open discussion about any particular idea, because that will stop the flow of new ideas popping up, right? We'll get hyper-focused in on one. So as facilitator, redirect that. Record every idea succinctly. So anything that comes up, record it succinctly, even if you don't agree with it or you think it's bad, whatever it is, just get it done. And listen for the team being done, kind of like popcorn in a pot. There's a point at which you don't hear any more popping happening, and that's a good time usually to wrap it up. So let's give it a whirl here together. We're going to take another just couple minutes to allow you to brainstorm for yourself. What are the potential initiatives? And there are some prompts up on the screen. Identify that interval. What do you think is most important in terms of focus? And if you're running out of ideas, you can pick one that you've written down and just ask yourself, if we had that, what would it give us? Or conversely, but what we really need or want is ... So let's give that a whirl. Just another 30 seconds or so. Okay, let's bring our attention back to the whole group here. Hope that was fruitful for you all. The next step after you've done your brainstorming is to look for themes or synthesis. And some of you may have very long lists of potential initiatives. Others of you may only have a few. Regardless, if you're doing this with a team, you will most likely have more than 5, which is the limit for a strategic plan in terms of numbers of initiatives. And so when you begin theming or synthesizing with your team, ask people to notice What themes do you see across initiatives? Is there a synthesis possible between different initiatives? How could these initiatives be consolidated? Or how can they be more focused, more targeted? And as you're doing this theming, as before, be sure to capture this in writing in preparation for the next activity together. So let's do this theming synthesizing here. And I'm going to give you just about a minute to think, a minute and a half maybe, to think through on your own what the themes are. And then we're going to break you into pairs where you get to share with each other what you've found so far and get some input from the other person. So let's get started with that theming for yourself. Okay, there may be more there for you, and feel free to keep reflecting, but Rebecca's going to break us into our pairs now, and you'll have just about 3 minutes each. And I will give you a little signal when it's halftime. And the instruction for your breakouts, introduce yourselves, share your synthesis and what it was like to get there. Receive any questions or comments from your partner on what you've shared, and jot down any insights that still arise. And we'll be putting these instructions into what we call the broadcast, which will show up at the top of your screen when you're in a breakout. So on that note, Rebecca, you can go ahead and break us out.
All right, great. You should have a ask to join a group on your screen. Great, make sure you accept that if you haven't yet. All right. Okay. If you want to be in a breakout, go ahead and go there. If not, you can take this time to work on your stuff solo. And I should broadcast that message.
Okay, you're about at the halfway point. Would be good to switch. And Rebecca just let me know that it looks like there are 3 people per group. So if that's the case, we'll just give you a little extra time for this breakout. You can fit everyone in.
How much time do they have left?
We have a total of about 4 minutes left.
Great. I sent that message to everybody. Catherine, if you can hear me, you said you're not hearing anything. Go ahead and I'll private message you to see if we can fix that. And if you just jumped on, we are in breakout rooms right now. So we're about to come all the way back together and in just a couple minutes. So hold tight and you're in the right place if you're here for the collaborative strategic planning webinar. And in 10 seconds, everyone will be back for those who are still in the main room.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was fun, useful for you. And yes, so after you've done the theming together as a team, the next step is to do what we call reflecting and gathering. And this part of the process in CoLab is from Theory U, for those of you who are familiar with that particular methodology. When you are in a group with your synthesis visible on paper, you can simply ask people to take a couple minutes of silence to reflect on what's missing from that synthesis and what else is possible. Typically, I try to read the group and understand, whether some more structured somatic exercise or facilitated meditation would be helpful. If that's not appropriate for the group, just a few minutes of silence, a breather, look out the window, with the basic focus of just noticing what's missing and what else is possible here. And when you come back out of that silence, take a moment to gather what the group has found. There's often some really breakthrough ideas can come out in this phase of the game, so it doesn't have to take long, but it's worth a lot in terms of the outcomes. So today, well, I'm just going to give us a couple of seconds here together, maybe even just 30 to do that work for our own selves. Take a moment to just be quiet and see what else arises for you from the work that you've done with synthesizing and theming. All right, so just take a moment to write anything down that came out of that moment of silence for yourself. And let's move into what we think of as the final step in our strategic planning process. And this we call our deciding segment. Now, when we come to this point in selecting our initiatives, it's really important to have financial estimates next to your initiatives, because some initiatives are going to cost a lot, some will not cost much, either in time or money. From those estimates and all other input, as if you are the facilitator of this process, you have the job of creating a proposal that your team can then take through its decision-making process. Now, we highly recommend having a clear collaborative decision-making process that includes everyone's perspective. And in the event that you don't have one yet, we highly recommend integrative consent, which we'll share a flowchart of this email by email afterwards. But sometimes all the work that the team has done prior to this point of deciding still leaves us with too many initiatives for a proposal to easily surface. And if that's the case, we recommend the use of what we call voting by criterion. And this means taking a little time to identify which criterion you as a team want to evaluate your initiatives at this time. And by criterion, I mean things like the SMART goals. And you can see up on the screen what those refer to. These are helpful, but sometimes they don't relate to our situation, or there may be other criterion that are really important. For example, how aligned to our mission is this initiative? Cost, as we mentioned above. Can we get funding for this? If you're a nonprofit, that will be an important part of the criterion in terms of evaluating your initiatives. And so the basic idea is, if you're doing the criterion process, is to create a chart with your initiatives on the left and the various criterion across the top. And from there, you can assign numbers and add up those numbers, really, and see who rises to the top. It can be that simple, and it's kind of fun. So we are going to take just a couple of minutes to have you go through this process on your own of just looking at that list and putting down a total of 5 stars, no more than 5 stars, and 3 is better if you can get it down to 3. We'll have a little time to digest this and time for questions and comments in a minute, but I'm just going to give you about a minute to reflect and take your initial crack at what you think those initiatives should be. All right, wrap up your thinking there. Okay, and let's come back to our whole group here together. And we're going to take a moment just for questions and comments. So back to you, Rebecca.
Great. Thanks, Cecile. So that was so quick, and I can see the wheels turning on everyone's screen here. It's really great to see that. And so I want to open it up to any questions or insights or just any comments that you want to offer. You could share how the process was for yourself. I'm going to exit out of this share here so we can just see each other. And just kind of whatever's coming up for you, especially any questions. We'll take just a few minutes here, and then we're going to provide some more time at the end as well for more questions. So if more comes up for you, you can ask. But go ahead and you can use the chat box, or you can open your mic up if you'd like. Sometimes it's easier to get a question across. And while you're thinking of that, we did have one question already that I'm remembering now, that we wanted to make sure that we bring up. And that is, someone asked, how often do you do this kind of thing? So I wanted just to let Cecile answer that question about how often do you suggest doing collaborative strategic planning?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And the short answer is as often as needed, which may not be quite as helpful as you'd like right now, but that really is the most effective answer, is to learn how to sense when the priorities you've currently got are no longer relevant, and take the time to revise them and update them. And again, if you'll recall back to the beginning of the webinar, ideally every team in an organization is going through their own strategic planning process based on the plan for the whole organization. And so if that ability to sort of notice isn't essentially present, I'd say check in at least every 6 months. Make sure you're revisiting those priorities and see, you may not need to change much, but chances are in the type of mission-driven organizations, in the current, market that we're in, the current environment we're in, things change fast. And so, yeah, I would say at least every 6 months by default, and better to sort of learn to sense when they're needed and make the updates then.
Great, thanks, Cecile. Any other questions that people want to bring up at this time? Don't be shy. You can unmute, or you can put it in the chat box. Oh, there's one right here. Great. What indicators can be used to quantify mission alignment? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, it's going to be different depending upon what your mission is. But in general, there are 2 different categories of creating metrics for your initiatives, right? And whether or not they're aligned with your mission. Some of those can be simply, essentially population, looking at, what's the overall changes in the kind of mission that we have. Chances are there are other organizations out there playing in that field, and you're all, autonomously trying to create certain changes. Say it's, better early childhood programs. You can begin to look for what are the larger societal metrics on that front and track those. You can also track your own internal deliverables, something as simple as how many programs have we delivered, how many people have we served. And those are not terribly sophisticated metrics, but they can be somewhat useful. It's better to actually begin, if you can, to learn from the impact you're having on the individuals. Is it working? So surveys are a great way to get that. Interviews can be helpful, but really going back to the people you're trying to help and find out, how are we doing? Is this working for you?
Great, thanks, Cecile. And another question here is, we'll take this one. do you have suggested tools or platforms for storing the plan, and also how to bridge the plan to the action level, the cycles for updating the difference between the plan and what happens?
Nice questions. I'll see if I can remember all of those. Let me go back to the chat box. Yeah, so tools or platforms. We've built a set of tools on Google, essentially Google Sheets, that are very helpful. They work minimally sufficiently for the needs of tracking what your initiatives are and what the metrics are that you want to track in relationship to those initiatives. The other place that I highly recommend having your initiatives is front and center on any project management platform that you have, because to your second question, Kiala, the how do we make this relevant in a daily manner, an operational manner, is that every individual on a team will align the projects that they choose for that day with what the current strategic priorities of the team are. And so having those priorities really clear, really laid out, right where I'm doing the work of deciding what am I going to do today is really helpful. The third sort of operational piece I highly recommend is that you do something called ops reports on a regular basis as part of your meeting practice. And that's a time for every individual to report on what have they done, what are they planning to do. And it's a great time to recreate that alignment on a regular basis, weekly, every other week, whatever the frequency is for your team that makes sense. But that sort of visibility into what's happening and the opportunity to sort of micro realign is really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just kind of underline that last point, that having this time to report on your projects to your team, and what ours includes is thinking of your top 5 targets, your top 5 projects for the week. And if those don't align with the strategic initiatives, if none of those do, then there's something that's not working. Either the projects need to be realigned to the initiatives, or maybe the strategic initiatives are no longer relevant. Like those should match up, not maybe perfectly, but at any given time, they should match up at some point to your work, if that helps provide that work picture. Great. Thanks, Cecile. And keep asking questions in the chat box if you'd like. We're going to let ourselves have a little bit more time past the hour. So if there are other lingering questions, things that came out of your breakout groups, even though they were so quick, or your journal activities, or some of you are working together, I see, which is great. So if there are questions that came out of that, like we're wondering, like we're stuck here and we want to go here, keep those questions and we'll provide some extra time after the hour to get into them. But before we do that, I'm going to share my screen here. And I want to share a few opportunities that you can think of for 2019. So I mentioned this in the beginning, and I want to make sure that we finish the year powerfully together, and that these are just opportunities for you to take on if you'd like. So 2 things that I want to share with you that are our strategic initiatives are, one is our bonus introductory session on January 10th in the new year. And the second one is to tell you a little bit more about the training behind this introductory session and the ways that you can enter a fast track or take advantage of our early bird deadline. So first, I'll just take a few minutes to talk about these things. And so the first thing, on January 10th, we're offering this bonus introductory session, and we'll be thinking about this, how this online training really focuses on, we've really focused on our online training the last year and a half. And as we go forward, we found that just collaboration really is so important to us, and all of our work is collaborative. And so we really value your input and want to hear from you to share about what your leadership strengths and challenges are, to inform this program, to exchange information about what you've learned this past year, to hear about what's next for you, and really come chat about what's happening in our leadership world. It's shifting every day. So we want to use this space both as a space to connect with you on leadership and as a way to offer what's next potentially for you. So that's on January 10th. It's free. We really want it to be more of a community building thing and sharing practices as well. So I want to invite you to that, and I'll send information about that. And with that, speaking of the new year, we've really honed in on are 5 things for this training, and they're on the screen. And so I'm curious about which activity or goal most resonates with you that you want in the new year. And this will also help us to inform our webinars for next year. So this is part of our hope, is that that whatever is getting the most energy, we'll focus on next year for our free webinars. So if you would humor me and put which one of these resonates with you the most, based on the number. So the first one is developing a somatic practice to handle overwhelm. 2, building collaborative facilitation skills. 3, strengthening alignment and accountability in yourself and your team. 4 is building community and hashing out the real world complexities in democratic management. And 5, is taking rapid collective decision making to the next level. So 3s, 4s, 2, 3, and 4. Maybe the answer is yes, all 5. And not 4 and 5, please. Okay. Yes, that's my favorite answer to most things. Great. And we will definitely take those into account for the new webinars of next year. And it's really helpful for us to hear that these are some things. If none of them are helpful, we want to hear that too. So you can just say no if none are helpful. So thanks for that. And so this is, like I said, this is part of the second thing I want to share with you, and connected to this opportunity is we do really want to focus on the Level 1 Collaborative Leadership Certification Program this year. And so I just want to share a little bit about that for you. So first off, this is a 10-week remote learning program. So it's all online for leaders within organizations or teams. They have been coaches, consultants, other visionaries that are just seeking to put the tools for democratic and participatory leadership and management into action. And at the same time, to build up leadership that's generative rather than dominating, which is something we see over and over again in our world. So I like to think of this training as having 2 different tracks. One is being leadership skills, and maybe somebody might call that soft skills, but the ways of becoming a collaborative leader, those important skills for a collaborative leader is a part of it. And then the second track is management. So those hard tools. How do you create a space where you can have a strategic planning session in any moment? How do you facilitate those meetings? How do you engage your team? Those 2 different tracks, so management and leadership skills. And so we like to approach our webinars in that way too. And today's been really, really more of the hard skill, but the soft skill is listening to those diverging perspectives in the brainstorm, listening to in the current state, what someone else is experiencing may be so different than yours. And in our teams, that's inevitable and important to move forward. Those are some of the soft skills that we talked about today that maybe aren't as front and center. So we like to think of soft and hard skills and how they're important to each other. So applications are open now if you want to get started on it. And we're offering an early bird incentive and scholarship. And we really have given out lots of scholarships to people who need it. So please don't be shy about that. And don't let that stop you, at least from starting a conversation. And if you apply by next week, we have a fast track kind of system. So email me if you're interested in that. And that information is on our website, roundskysolutions.com/CLCP1. So with that, I'd like to circle back to Q&A, and we are at the hour, but like I said, we want to take 10 to 15 more minutes for anyone who has lingering questions, especially if you can be specific about this thing is happening. What's your thought on that? We really want that. So I'll open up the floor again to any questions or follow-up questions from earlier. And I'll stop my share, so feel free to put that in any questions in the chat box, or to open your mic up if you need help opening your mic up, please maybe wave your hands. And if there are no questions, that's also appropriate. All right. I'll give ourselves a few more seconds just in case there's one like percolating. Will you be sharing the slides? Oh, yes, absolutely. And the recording.
And the integrative consent model.
That decision-making model.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you. Oh, I think there might be a question during the decision-making. Liz, if you want to open your mic up, you can ask. If that's quicker for you.
Hi, sorry. During the decision-making process, are there better and worse ways to write the proposals? Let's say like to write up the initiatives that are going to be voted on, just so you don't accidentally bias people who are going to make a decision one way or the other.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I'll answer with what we typically recommend, which is to describe your initiatives in the past tense as completed items, right? That works somehow with our brain wiring to help us be more clear as to A, when it's done, and B, to create the various sub-projects that will be necessary to deliver on that initiative. And the other, to your point, in terms of not biasing, the outcome in a decision-making process, making all of those initiatives sort of grammatically consistent will help. But if there's more there in terms of your question about bias, feel free to ask again or give an example.
I wish I had an example that came to mind, but no, not really, but thank you.
Yeah. I think when you asked your question, it sounded like you would create a strategic plan and someone else would make a decision on it, or that your team is making a decision on it together.
No, I'm just thinking how to apply this in the future, not right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
It's more just that when he said the facilitator would then have the responsibility to write up a proposal after the brainstorming session, like, best practices to do that, with the person who has that responsibility in order to honor everything that had happened previously.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. So they do have the responsibility to create a proposal that is a synthesis of what has been put forward so far, and to also use the power that they've been given as facilitator to create the proposal that they think is really best on behalf of the organization. Now, keep in mind that with an effective decision-making process, the proposal is really perhaps, it's certainly an important part of getting a decision-making process rolling, but it should be followed by questions and comments, a chance for amendments, and then what we call the integration round, which is specifically around objections. What objection do you have to these proposals? And those objections are focused on what's going to cause harm to the organization. And so if you have an effective process like that, by the time you're done, that initial proposal may look very different and will be something that is for the best of the whole organization, regardless if that facilitator, had some bias walking into that proposal.
And I guess the lack, let's say, of time efficiency will make sure that the presence of any bias will be kind of avoided, right? Like because it will take longer to go through the process this way, right? As opposed, since it's a democratic situation.
Yes, there's a lot of benefits that come from having everyone participate in the decision-making process, because if you get to the end and you might not personally like it, you've still had a chance to participate, to create it, and to surface any objections. And so that saves in the long run by not having people walking off being like, well, I didn't vote for that, right? So I'm not going to do it, right? So integrative consent is not voting, right? It's voting, but with the integration of the no's, right? So we're not we're not polarizing in the same way that voting does, right? And losing the benefit of what's underneath that no. I don't know if that addressed your question fully, but feel free to keep clarifying.
No, it did. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes time does, like, okay, actually, this isn't that big of a deal. I'll just say this is fine. It's actually not going to cause harm. So that time efficiency may come up. And I think I want to just say that the point that you made, Cecile, about it is much more efficient because it's not as much of going around to everybody and trying to get them on board to a plan that they may actually not have any say in, and may not, like, I've had bosses come to me like, this is the plan, don't you feel great about it? And like, there's not actually room for me to say no, because then nothing will change. And if I say no, then I'm being combative. So this process allows the no's to happen without being confrontational and with getting people on board, and that, which is different than a hierarchical business, right? So it's a different approach, and it is more time in the beginning, but less time saved at the end, possibly, and likely. So any other questions that are burning or simmering? Great. Well, thank you everyone for staying on a little bit longer. Thank you for those questions, as I think those are really important. And I saw some interested faces in the screen, so I think those resonate with other people as well. And it's been really wonderful to be on the call with you all today. Thanks for your time. And we'll go ahead. Feel free to open your mics and say goodbye if you'd like. And we'll end in a minute.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to see you on the call. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody, and Merry Christmas.
Same to you.